Right now, we go to the phones to find out what exactly has been going on in the presidential race, at least those connected to Texas and those who are running for president and swinging through Texas. The Texas Tribune's Patrick Svitek joining us this morning. Patrick, good morning. How you doing today?
Great. Good morning, Chad.
Good. Patrick, it was a busy week for you and for those covering the Democrats, and I've noticed this, and I'm sure you have as well, with this increased, focus on Texas from both the Republicans and the Democrats. You know, they're both kind of looking at Texas maybe turning purple, maybe on the brink of a battleground state. We're going to see a lot more of these presidential candidates swing through the state. And I don't know if all 20 of them were down in Houston this week, but quite a few of the Democrats running for president were down in Houston, correct?
They were. 8 of them, actually, were in Houston for a forum that was hosted at Texas Southern University by a group called She the People. It's kind of like a national political coalition of women of color involved in politics. Obviously, that's a very important voting bloc, particularly within the Democratic primary. And it was the first event of its kind that this group had held. And it was honestly one of the biggest gatherings of the candidates, the Democratic candidates that we've seen so far in the primary, not to mention the fact that it was in Texas, a place that usually doesn't get, that usually isn't host to these kinds of gatherings, especially this early in the process. So it was a notable moment in the broader primary. It was also a notable moment within the primary and the race in Texas.
You know, I think that you had tweeted that Beto O'Rourke got a pretty big welcome from those who were in attendance at this forum. Did anyone else kind of stick out as far as making news or things that were said during this forum?
You know, there wasn't a lot of explicit news made, but there were certainly some very notable receptions and reactions. As you noted, Beto O'Rourke got a pretty strong reception. Kamala Harris got a pretty strong reception. But someone who really stood out to me in terms of how the crowd received her was Elizabeth Warren. She, I think, I would argue, had the best reception from the crowd there, if not one of the best. And she was doing kind of call and response with the crowd and really mixing it up with her fans in the audience. And she was getting very specific in her answers to questions. And she kept saying things like, you know, I have a plan. And the audience just seemed to love that. They loved to hear, the level of specificity that she offered when she was responding to these questions. And I think she went over really well. And I wasn't in the auditorium at the time, but from what I can tell, she was the only candidate who got a standing ovation, and she was the last one to go. So people had to sit through a lot of other speeches to get
Well,
to her.
Maybe they were just excited that they got to go home. I mean,
exactly.
that might be part of it, Patrick.
That's what the standing ovations were, right? Yeah, it was a 3-hour event, so I'm sure some people were excited to get out of there finally.
You know,
I'm sure some journalists gave a standing ovation.
Oh, absolutely. They're like, all right, okay, now we can go write all this up. Now, you know, with Elizabeth Warren, and you know, and I try to look at this, you know, through at both angles here. I watched Elizabeth Warren in her town hall on CNN early in the week when they did that 5-hour marathon of town halls. It sounds like to me Elizabeth Warren is getting a lot better and is very comfortable in these type of town hall moments.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think she's very comfortable in those settings. She's very comfortable in just embracing her identity, I think, as kind of like a policy wonk and as kind of like the ideas candidate in this primary. Obviously, this is the primary is still early, but we've seen some candidates who've been much more vague and much more kind of general in speaking about their ideas and their positions. And she's someone, it seems, who sees the benefit in just kind of going all in, being very detailed, and providing a lot of policy this early in the race. And I think it resonated really well with that audience in Houston. I should note that audience in Houston, a lot of these people in the audience were women of color who are already involved in politics. They're people who probably are following the race pretty closely and already know a lot about the candidates. And so it was a very politically educated audience, I'd argue. And so it would make sense that they would appreciate, I think, the candidate who came out and was kind of the most specific.
Patrick, I know it's early in this whole deal, even though it seems like we've been talking about presidential politics for a long, long time. for 2020. Maybe it never ends. Maybe it's just one continuous race from presidential cycle to presidential cycle. Have we seen any type of polling done for the Democrats in Texas? Because the state of Texas is going to be a big prize for someone out there.
Right. Are you referring to in the primary or in the general election?
Yeah, in the primary. In the primary.
Yeah, there was actually one poll that came out this week from a Democratic-leaning polling firm called Change Research that tested the Democratic presidential primary in Texas, and it had Beto O'Rourke in the lead, but only about 5 percentage points ahead of Joe Biden, and then in third place in kind of similar numerical range was Bernie Sanders. And so, I think that confirms that a lot of people, have been thinking that Beto O'Rourke still has a very strong base of support in Texas from his Senate run, and that if the primary were held tomorrow, that he would likely win here. And then also with, Sanders and Biden being at the top of that, I think that reflects the broader national trend we've seen in polling, at least with Biden, that right now that high number is reflecting high name recognition, and it remains to be seen how much that number is going to sustain once he's actually in the race, actively campaigning, actively making his case to the voters. Obviously, Biden just officially launched his campaign yesterday. But nonetheless, that poll showed that Beto O'Rourke would be in the lead if the primary were held tomorrow. I should note the other Texan in the race, Julian Castro, was in the back of the pack in that poll. I think it was 4%. And he's been making the case, as has O'Rourke, but it's more notable in this case, Castro's been making the case that if you nominate me, I'm someone who can go and win states like Texas, like Arizona, like Florida, like some of these Sun Belt states that Democrats think that their future lies in. Right now, the polling does not back up that argument for Castro, at least that one survey.
No, not at all. And I think in that survey, if I remember, if I saw this right, Pete Buttigieg was doing a lot better than Julian Castro in this state.
Yeah, I think Pete Buttigieg was at like maybe fourth or fifth in that poll, right behind Bernie Sanders. Basically that poll, I think, reflected the national environment, but then it put Beto O'Rourke first just because of his built-in, home state advantage here. So it wasn't really too surprising that O'Rourke was number one, and then the rest of the order was basically, reflecting what we've seen nationally so far in the horse race.
And Mayor Pete's going to be going through and raising some money here in the state, correct?
Yeah, he has a trip scheduled to Texas, I believe, early next month. He's going to be in Houston. He's going to be in Dallas. We're going to be seeing a number of candidates just in May alone coming to Texas. Not only Buttigieg, Kirsten Gillibrand, the U.S. Senator from New York, is going to be coming through, doing some fundraising events in Dallas. And there's at least 2 or 3 more candidates that I have on my radar that are already kind of booked trips to Texas. It's not too unusual that they come to Texas this early to do fundraising. It's really a question of whether these candidates see value to doing public campaign events in Texas, which are obviously, that signifies that they actually think that there's, public and popular support here for them to gain. We saw that this week with Bernie Sanders. He not only appeared at that forum in Houston, but he ended up holding a campaign rally afterward in Houston, and then the next day he went to Fort Worth and held a campaign rally there. So that's what I'm kind of watching. It's not too unusual to see candidates come to Texas and raise money behind closed doors. It's kind of this early in the process. Which candidates are coming to Texas, not only raising money, but also looking to build public support by holding public events.
Yeah, absolutely. The other big Texas political story of the week, I think, is the fact that Senator Cornyn now has at least one Democrat challenger, MJ Hager, running against John Cornyn. She's running the Democrat primary. For a lot of folks maybe out here, Patrick, they may not know a lot about MJ Hager. She's a candidate from the Round Rock area, correct?
Yeah, she is. She ran a very spirited congressional race last year in a traditionally Republican district against John Carter. She raised a lot of money for that district. And a lot of that fundraising, that millions of dollars of fundraising, was fueled by these very attention-grabbing ads that she put out, including one called Doors, which kind of detailed her military background, her fight to let women serve in combat roles in the military. She has a very compelling background and became kind of a political celebrity, at least in this part of the state. But she's now, as you pointed out, she's now running statewide, which is a a whole nother game in a place like Texas, and you really have to be ready for a totally different kind of battle than if you're running in a congressional district. And so she has her work cut out for her. I mean, if you remember, Beto O'Rourke, he launched his U.S. Senate campaign in, I think, the end of March 2017, and he raised $80 million, campaigns, nonstop, and did not make it over the hump. He was able to get within 3 points, but he didn't win. And so for someone like MJ Hager, who's going to potentially have a competitive primary to get through first, which O'Rourke didn't, she's got it's a real uphill battle, I think. But nonetheless, I think a lot of people agree that this race in the general election could still be competitive.
Yeah, and she may face Joaquin Castro in a primary battle, which I think that would be a very heated debate between and primary battle between those two. Do we have a timeline on when he may or may not announce?
We don't. He's been a little bit of a mystery in terms of when he's going to announce his decision and actually what it's going to be. He has said that he's still considering it. He dropped a hint last week or the week before that maybe he would announce his decision by May 1st. He noted that when he announced in 2017 that he was passing on that U.S. Senate race, that he announced that on May 1st. So maybe he was setting up a timeline to announce it by then. But it's still a little bit of a mystery whether he's going to go for it. I've talked to people who are convinced that he's not going to run. I've talked to people who are convinced that he's genuinely still trying to make up his mind. But I think nonetheless, there's some Democrats who just want there to be a decision out there, and so they can move on and focus on making, selecting the nominee and getting ready for battle against Cornyn.
Well, and he's got a pretty good gig right now. Where he is within a Democrat-controlled Congress, he's in a completely safe seat. I could see why he would not want to run. Versus, it's still going to be difficult to take out a sitting U.S. senator in what is still a red state right now. It could become a battleground state, but I mean it would be pretty tough for him to leave his seat, wouldn't it? And run. I mean, it's still there's a lot of risk there for him if he were to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Even his brother, Julian Castro, the presidential candidate, said this week that, look, Joaquin's got a good thing going in Congress. He sits on 2 or 3 very important committees, including the Intelligence Committee, which has been, obviously on the front lines of investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election. And Joaquin Castro is also chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And so there's plenty of opportunities for him to grow his profile in Congress and move up in Congress, quite frankly. You could see him having a shot at the leadership table, in the not too distant future. And so, like I said, I think he's got a good thing going there, and it may be tough to walk away from.
Yeah. All right. Patrick Svitek with the Texas Tribune. Patrick, anything you want to highlight on y'all's website, texastribune.org?
Well, we are, as the legislative session winds down, we are working around the clock here to cover how this entire debate over school finance and property taxes is going to unfold. So check out our website, obviously, for the latest on that. We've got 31 days left in the session, and there's still a lot of open questions about how these 2 big issues are going to come together for lawmakers and whether there's going to need to be an overtime round, a special session. So TexasTribune.org for all the latest.
Yeah, and you can also see Patrick's road trip list, music list,
right.
on TexasTribune.org. I mean, that's the main reason to go right now, Patrick. I mean, don't be shy about that, okay? Patrick, as always, appreciate your time. We'll visit with you next week, okay?
Thank you.
Have a good one. That's Patrick Svitek with the Texas Tribune.